Clara always knew that being a single mother would be challenging, but she never imagined how much this role would shape her life. Since Lucas's birth, she took on the responsibility of being not only a mother but also the father, the guide, and the confidant. Raising a child alone was a mission she embraced with all the love she had. The relationship between Clara and Lucas was something special, something that transcended mere daily coexistence. They were accomplices, partners in every small adventure of. On Sunday mornings, they had a ritual of making pancakes together, always with an extra pinch of fun. Lucas, at just 8 years old, loved the feeling of autonomy his mother gave him, always encouraging him to get involved in everything. Each small gesture was a way for Clara to show that she trusted her son, that she believed in his ability to grow independent and strong. The laughter that echoed through the kitchen on those mornings was proof of the bond. There were moments, however, when Clara found herself thinking about how it would be if Lucas's father were still around. But these memories were soon pushed aside by her determination to be everything Lucas needed. She had no time for regrets. Her life was Lucas, and that was enough. When he was around, any shadow of sadness dissipated. Lucas was a sweet, sensitive, and extremely affectionate. However, amidst her simple life, Clara began to notice something subtle. Lucas, with his sharp perception, always seemed to know when she was worried, even when she tried to hide it. "Mom, everything will be all right, don't worry," he would often say, holding her hand with a truth that transcended his age. It was as if, somehow, Lucas had a sixth sense that. But as Clara reflected on the depth, it was an ordinary day, like any other. Clara and Lucas spent a morning together, laughing and having fun while preparing yet another breakfast full of pancakes and mess. Clara watched Lucas run around the yard with his soccer ball, his face lit up by the joy of simply being a child. She always cherished these moments, small fragments of happiness that made all the effort worthwhile. In the afternoon, Clara received a work call and had to take it inside the house, leaving Lucas playing in the garden. It was a quick matter, just a few minutes, but time seemed to stretch when worrying about an active child like Lucas. She was about to hang up the phone when she heard a sound that froze her heart, tires screeching on the asphalt and a metallic crash followed by. Desperate, Clara ran to the street. What she saw made the world around her stop. Lucas lay motionless on the asphalt, with a car parked a few meters away, the driver with his hands on his head, visibly in shock. The image of her son sprawled on the ground, not moving, etched itself in her mind like an open wound. Clara rushed to him, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in her ears. She fell to her knees beside Lucas's small, fragile body, feeling the unbearable weight of fear. "Lucas! My love, talk to me," she shouted, her voice choked, holding her son's body, waiting, pleading for some sign of life. But Lucas did not move. The world around Clara became a blur, the voices of the people approaching were obviously distant, unreal. All that existed at that moment was her son's body in her arms, a sense of helplessness that suffocated her. An ambulance arrived quickly, but to Clara, it felt like minutes dragged on like hours. The paramedics moved Lucas, asking her to trust them, but that was impossible. How could she trust when her son, her reason for living, was there, fighting for his life? She followed the ambulance in silence, despair mixing with disbelief. Everything had changed in an instant. The boy who moments before had been running joyfully in the yard was now. Upon arriving at the hospital, Lucas was taken directly to the ICU. Clara could not comprehend what was happening. She sat in the waiting room, her hands trembling, unable to think of anything but the image of Lucas lying on the asphalt. The doctors passed by her quickly, speaking technical words that made no sense. Cranial trauma, critical condition, observation for the next 24 hours. Empty words, unable to ease. That night, Clara sat by Lucas's bedside, watching the machines that kept her son alive. The sound of the heart monitors was a constant reminder of the fragility of life. As she watched Lucas's chest rise and fall slowly, Clara did the only thing she could: she prayed. She prayed to any force that could hear her, for her son to have a chance to survive. She promised she would do anything, sacrifice everything, if it meant Lucas would come back too. But deep down, something was already beginning to change within Clara. An inexplicable feeling that the connection between her and Lucas, the one that had always been so strong, was now crossing a boundary she had never imagined crossing. She felt a presence. Something or someone seemed to be watching them. And although she did not know what it was, Clara began to suspect that this tragedy was not merely an accident, but the prelude to something much larger and darker. The hours in the ICU dragged on unbearably. Every time Clara looked at Lucas, the machines closed in on him, her heart breaking a little more. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. She knew that recovering from such a severe trauma was uncertain, but she refused to believe in anything other than her son's complete recovery. The love she held for him was immeasurable, and nothing, not even the threat of death, could break. During the early morning, the silence of the ICU was broken only by the continuous beep of the monitors. Clara remained awake, beside Lucas, her eyes tired and red from crying and watching over him. It was then that it happened. Suddenly, her surroundings seemed to change. A cold breeze swept through the room, and Clara felt a presence. It was not imaginary, it was so real that she instinctively spoke, looking around. The room, once filled with electronic devices and blinking lights, seemed to be immersed in a surreal darkness. Clara blinked several times, trying to ward off fatigue when a voice, soft and almost inaudible, echoed in the room. "Mommy, be careful," it was Lucas. But he was still unconscious. His eyes were closed, his body motionless on the bed, and yet she swore she heard his voice. A shiver ran down Clara's spine. She leaned closer to her son's bedside, hoping he would repeat those words. But the silence was deafening. What had just happened? Had it been a waking dream, an illusion caused by exhaustion? Clara tried to rationalize what she had felt, but the sense that something was deeply wrong continued to grow. She felt a knot in her stomach, an unease she couldn't ignore. Lucas's message lingered in her mind: "Mommy, be careful." But careful of what? Or who? Her son seemed to be trying to warn her about something, she was certain of that. Even unconscious, Lucas seemed to know something she didn't. Clara could not shake the feeling of imminent danger. Lucas's words, still echoing in her dreams, weighed on her like a constant threat in her mind. She knew that Ricardo was not a beneficial presence in their lives, and now every interaction with him carried an invisible tension. Although her deceased husband's brother had always been around, something had changed drastically. Clara felt, with an unsettling certainty, that he was hiding dark secrets. In the following days, the routine at the hospital became an emotional roller coaster. Lucas remained in critical condition, and the doctors continued to be uncertain about his recovery. Clara spent as much time as possible by his side, staying alert, both in her vigilance for her son and in her growing distrust of Ricardo. With each visit from her brother-in-law, a sense of claustrophobia enveloped her. He spoke calmly, with a soft, concerned voice, but Clara sensed something sinister in his words, as if there was an interest. One afternoon, while watching Lucas in his comatose state, Clara dozed off for a brief moment, exhausted from sleep deprivation. It was then that something inexplicable happened. In the midst of her light sleep, she felt as if she were being pulled out of her own body. The hospital room, the sounds of machines, everything disappeared. Suddenly, Clara found herself in a different place, a void immersed in darkness. In the center of that emptiness, Lucas stood, his face illuminated by a soft light. "Lucas," she called, confused and scared. Her voice came out softly, as if she were whispering. "Mommy, you have to protect me," he said with a calm that was frightening for a child. His eyes, though serene, carried a wisdom Clara had never seen before. "He is waiting for a moment of weakness. He wants to harm us." Before Clara could respond, everything vanished, and she woke up abruptly, back in the hospital. She was panting, her heart racing, and for a moment, she didn't know if what she had just experienced was a dream or something more real. The sight of Lucas, serene in his bed, was still before her, but the words he had spoken during the strange encounter reverberated with intensity. "Uncle Ricardo. He is not what he seems." When he left, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders, but she also knew that the true threat was far from resolved. Lucas remained in critical condition, and Clara could do nothing but wait and keep her eyes open. Ricardo would not stop until he got what he wanted. After Ricardo's last visit, Clara felt a momentary rupture, but Lucas's warning continued to pulse in her mind like a constant siren. She knew she needed to act with intelligence and care. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but there were still important details missing that could reveal Ricardo's plan. For Clara, it was no longer a matter of suspicion, it was a certainty that something evil was about to happen, and she had to stay one step ahead. The next morning, Clara received a call from the lawyer she had contacted. He had a serious expression on the other end of the line, and his voice carried a tone of concern. "Clara, you were right to stay alert. I found something strange in your husband's life insurance documents. A few months before the accident, there was a change in the policy, and Ricardo was added as a secondary beneficiary, right after you and Lucas. This is very unusual, considering he never..." Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. What else was Ricardo plotting? It was now clear that he had a financial motive, making him even more dangerous. She had always believed that her husband's death was a tragic accident, but now she could no longer ignore the evidence pointing to something sinister. What if Ricardo had planned everything from the beginning? What if he had been eyeing the family's money even before the tragedy? With her heart racing, Clara asked the lawyer to continue investigating. There was no time to waste, as Ricardo's presence became increasingly suffocating. She could not push him out of their lives without concrete evidence, but she knew she would have to confront him somehow. Lucas, even in a coma, had given her a clear warning, and she couldn't ignore that supernatural connection between them. It was as if the boy, even unconscious, was trying to reach out to her from afar, alerting her to the approaching danger. As Clara held on to Lucas's hand, the medical monitors studied his activity. Small movements indicated that Lucas was fighting to return within his mind. The doctors were called in a rush, and within minutes they were evaluating the signs related to the boy. Clara, holding hands with her son, prayed silently. She felt that Lucas was trying to communicate with her again, in a way that transcended physical understanding. That inexplicable connection they had was now even stronger. When the doctors arrived, Clara shifted even closer to Lucas. Then something happened. Without opening his eyes, Lucas slightly opened her hand. Clara froze. "Mommy," his voice came out shaky, like a whisper, but clear enough for her to hear. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. He was there, coming back. The miracle she had been praying for was happening right before her eyes. By the end of that afternoon, Ricardo appeared at the hospital again. Clara, now with more clarity than ever about his true character, decided to keep up appearances. It was as if she were dealing with a predator, and any wrong move could trigger an unpredictable occurrence. Ricardo, as always, feigned concern, but Clara saw through his mask of false compassion. Now, she knew the truth. Clara merely nodded, not wanting to prolong the conversation. She was playing a dangerous game now, and she knew time was running out. Lucas was coming back. Silence filled the hospital room after Ricardo left. Clara stood beside Lucas's bed, feeling on the edge of an abyss. Despite the calm facade she had maintained in front of Ricardo, her heart was racing. She knew that the time to act was running out. Lucas had awakened, but the danger was still lurking. That night, Clara barely managed to sleep. Every sound, every movement in the hospital seemed suspicious. Ricardo's presence would become a constant shadow, and the threat he posed was clearer than ever. She remembered Lucas's words, "He's still here. Be careful of him." It was as if her son, even in a state between life and unconsciousness, had a vision beyond the normal, something Clara still didn't fully understand but that guided her actions. The next morning, Clara decided to take action. She knew that Ricardo would not wait indefinitely and that he was merely waiting for an opportunity to strike the final blow. Upon arriving at the hospital, she went straight to meet the lawyer who had already been involved in the investigation. The meeting was brief, but charged with tension. Clara revealed to the lawyer everything that had happened, from Ricardo's strange behavior to her disturbing dreams. "Clara, we are investigating the financial records and the changes in the insurance policy further. There are irregularities that need more time to unravel, but what has already been discovered is enough to raise serious suspicions. The next step will be to involve the police, but we need more concrete evidence. I suggest you do not confront Ricardo directly. If he knows you suspect him, he could become even more dangerous," he warned. Clara nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, but she could no longer ignore what was happening. She needed to stay calm and continue with her plan. While waiting for the investigation to unfold, she began to observe Ricardo more closely, looking for any signs that he might be plotting against them. "I'm here, my love," she whispered, hoping, for no apparent reason, for a response. And then, like an inspiration from another realm, she heard Lucas's voice in her mind again, "Mommy, he is closer than you think." Clara recoiled, her heart racing. Could it be possible that Lucas, even in his sleep, was still communicating with her? Or was it her own mind, overloaded with fear and exhaustion, playing tricks on her? The bond between mother and child was undeniable. Days passed, and Ricardo continued to show up at the hospital, always with the same smile disguised as concern. But now Clara knew he was just waiting for the right moment to act. It was a game of shadows. Finally, one night, something changed. Ricardo, seemingly casually, appeared to be tending to some important family documents. "I'll swing by your house tomorrow to pick up some papers I need," he said, as if it were a routine matter. But to Clara, that felt like a veiled threat. Ricardo was ready to strike. Tension grew within Clara. She knew the decisive moment was approaching, but she still didn't know how to confront him. It was then that, in the middle of the night, she had a disturbing dream. She was in a dark room, and Lucas, dressed in white, was beside her. He said nothing, but his eyes conveyed a clear message: time is running out. Clara woke up in a cold sweat. She needed to act quickly. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. Confronting Ricardo was next, and it would be a fight for the survival of her family. Lucas had warned her several times, and now it was her responsibility to protect herself and her son from that dangerous man who was increasingly revealing his evil intentions. The next morning, Clara felt a sense of urgency that she could barely control. The dream with Lucas lingered disturbingly, and Ricardo's imminent visit seemed like a harbinger of disaster. Clara knew he would use any excuse to invade her home, and now she was about to act. Before leaving for the hospital, Clara called the lawyer again. "He's going to my house today. I know he's offering something. We need a solution before it's too late." The voice on the other end was firm but cautious. "Clara, don't do anything impulsive. Keep observing and documenting everything you can. We have almost all the attempts we need, but we still need to be patient." She took a deep breath, knowing she needed to stay calm, but her maternal instinct was screaming to protect Lucas at all costs. She decided she wouldn't wait any longer. Ricardo would be at her house in a few hours, and she wouldn't let him act without resistance. Upon arriving at the hospital, Clara found Lucas asleep, still slowly recovering. She sat beside him, holding his small hand. For a moment, she felt a surge of energy, as if she were recharging her strength just by being near her son. The bond between them, so inexplicable, now felt like a direct line of protection, something that transcended their connection. His recovery was faster than the doctors had predicted, and Clara knew there was something beyond medicine involved in this. "Mommy, he's coming, isn't he?" Lucas murmured, his voice still weak but filled with certainty. Those words echoed in Clara's mind. "Fear of me? That had never existed. Hours later, Clara decided to leave the hospital earlier than usual. She knew Ricardo would be at her house soon, and she wanted to be there when he arrived. As she entered her home, she felt the weight of every detail, the memories her family had built there, Lucas's laughter echoing through the halls, her deceased husband's presence in every corner. All of that was under threat, and Clara wouldn't allow Ricardo to destroy it. It wasn't long before she heard the doorbell. Ricardo arrived with his usual posture of false calm, but Clara now saw beyond the mask. She invited him in, disguising her growing tension, and he went straight to the living room, commenting on the documents he needed to pick up. While he rummaged through some drawers, Clara moved silently, watching every move. Then, something unexpected happened. Ricardo, apparently distracted, dropped a piece of paper from a folder he was carrying. Quickly, Clara grabbed the document before he could reach it. As she read it, Clara's blood ran cold. It was a fraudulent contract. "You've always been involved in this, haven't you?" Clara said, her voice now firm and unafraid. Ricardo rolled his eyes, surprised by her boldness, but quickly tried to disguise it. "I don't know what you're talking about, Clara." But Clara was undeterred. With the document in hand, she confronted him directly. "I know everything, Ricardo. I know you changed my husband's life insurance policy. I know you were hoping Lucas wouldn't survive. And now, you want..." Ricardo's smile vanished, and his true face finally emerged. "You've always been hopeful, Clara, but not enough. I thought you would stay out of my way. Everything I did was for the good of the family, you know that." Clara stepped forward, feeling more powerful than ever. Lucas was right. Ricardo was afraid of her. The atmosphere grew tense. Realizing he was cornered, Ricardo took a step back. Determined to put an end to the threat once and for all, Clara picked up the phone and called the lawyer. While she spoke, Ricardo tried to intimidate her with words, but he no longer had power over her. Clara was now unbeatable. "I've already alerted the authorities. You will pay for everything you've done, Ricardo," Clara said, with a cold calmness that even surprised herself. Seeing that his plan had failed, Ricardo shot Clara one last look of hatred before running out the door. Clara, however, felt no fear. She knew he was finished, and now she could protect Lucas from any threat. The battle was not yet completely won. Upon returning to the hospital that night, Clara found Lucas awake, smiling at her. "I knew you could do it, Mommy. I knew." Clara hugged her son tightly, feeling that despite all the challenges, they had triumphed. The connection between mother and child was the true weapon that would destroy Ricardo. Clara felt exhausted but determined. After the confrontation with Ricardo, she knew there was still much to do to ensure that Lucas would be safe forever. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but a part of her still couldn't rest completely. That morning, as Clara watched Lucas playing with one of the toys she had brought to the hospital, her mind was racing. The lawyer was already taking care of the legal matters, and Ricardo, knowing he was in trouble, had disappeared, likely trying to avoid the consequences. But Clara knew it wouldn't be long before the truth came to light. Looking at her son, Clara saw something different. Lucas seemed more alert, almost as if he had emotionally aged after the accident. It was as if that near-fatal experience had transformed him in an inexplicable way. Suddenly, Lucas looked at her, his gaze far too serious for a child his age. "Mommy, you know he hasn't really gone away, right? He's just waiting." Those words hit her like a punch. "He?" Clara said, her throat tight. "Are you talking about?" Lucas shook his head vigorously. "No, Mommy. The other man. He's always in the darkness, but I see him." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, Lucas? Who is this man?" Lucas stared at her, as if trying to find the right words. "He was there when I was sleeping. He tried to grab me, but you were there. I saw your light, and he had to go away." Clara's mind was spinning. What Lucas was describing was not just a child's fear. There was something deeper, darker, hidden in his words. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Lucas's words echoed in her mind like a warning. She had confronted Ricardo, but were there more enemies lurking? The next morning, Clara decided to visit the old family home, where she had lived with her late husband. She felt that the past held answers she had yet to uncover. The house seemed frozen in time. The familiar smell of aged wood and the memories of a life she and Lucas had left behind were everywhere. Each room brought back memories, some happy, others painful. Clara headed straight to her husband's office, where he used to spend hours working, feeling a pressure in her chest as she entered the room. It was as if his presence was still there, watching. "Dear Clara, there is more to the game than it seems." Clara recoiled, feeling a wave of despair and anger wash over her. Her husband had known all along. He knew something was wrong but never had the chance to tell the truth. The accident that took him was not a mere coincidence. Thoughts of the storm began to swirl like a whirlwind in her mind. She knew Ricardo wasn't acting alone. That other man Lucas had mentioned, could he be someone involved in the conspiracy mentioned in the letter? Clara felt a chill. Ricardo was just a piece on the board. There was a greater force, a shadow behind all of it, and now she was on the right path to discover who or what it was. Back at the hospital, Clara felt different. They were stronger, more aware that the threats were not merely earthly. With tears in her eyes, Clara knew her son was right. But the real battle was yet to begin. The day was clear and sunny, but Clara felt a constant weight on her shoulders. The discovery of her late husband's letter had opened an abyss of secrets, and now she knew the web of conspiracies stretched far beyond Ricardo. That shadow Lucas had mentioned, the man in the darkness, felt more real with each passing moment. Clara spent the morning at the hospital, watching Lucas recover, but her mind was miles away, trying to piece together the fragments of that dark puzzle. Her husband's letter had raised more questions than answers. As Clara reflected on all of this, she felt a gentle touch on her arm. She looked to the side and saw Lucas, with his radiant eyes and a calm smile on his face. "Mommy, you found what Daddy wanted you to know, didn't you?" The innocence in his voice contrasted with the depth of what he seemed to understand. Clara looked at her son, surprised. He shrugged, as if it were obvious. "I dreamed about Daddy last night. He said you need to find that letter, it would help you." Clara felt a shiver. The coincidences were becoming increasingly unsettling. That afternoon, Clara decided to return home, where she had found the letter. She knew there were more secrets hidden in that place. As she walked through the silent corridors of the old house, the tension mounted. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself were permeated by the presence of something invisible. She stopped in front of her husband's desk again, feeling a coldness in her spine. The man in the darkness was real. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the house, interrupting her thoughts. It was the noise of something being knocked over downstairs. Clara froze. The house was completely empty, or it should have been. Her heart began to race. Without making a sound, Clara grabbed her phone, ready to call the police, but something inside her made her hesitate. If she were truly dealing with someone so dangerous, would the authorities be able to protect her? And more, was this what the man wanted, her to turn to the police for help? Determined to face whatever was lurking, Clara slowly descended the stairs. On the floor, by the door, there was a small object, something that clearly shouldn't be there. A golden lighter. That night, Clara returned to the hospital with an even greater sense of urgency. She was not only dealing with Ricardo but with forces she still didn't fully understand. Clara tried to smile at her son, but inside she was devastated. There was something much bigger than she could comprehend at play, and Lucas was at the center of it all. As Clara held Lucas, she felt a presence in the room, not a physical one, but an invisible force hovering around. It was as if the very air was charged with electric tension. A soft whisper, almost inaudible, echoed in her ears. It wasn't Lucas's voice but someone else's. He's coming. Get ready. Clara looked around, trying to understand where the voice was coming from, but there was no one there. Just her and Lucas in the room. Fear turned into determination. She knew the danger was closer than ever, but now she was prepared. The words Clara had heard that night wouldn't leave her mind. He's coming. Get ready. Although she didn't recognize who had whispered those words, the sense of urgency grew within her, as if she were about to face something far beyond her control. The following days passed in a blur of medical appointments, meetings with lawyers, and a constant watch over Lucas. He was recovering well physically, but Clara knew something inside him had changed since the accident. Lucas's gaze was more distant, as if he were seeing something beyond the reality around him. While Clara was signing the papers to release Lucas, a nurse hurried into the room, handing her a pale envelope. "This arrived for you, ma'am," the woman said, with an expression that revealed her nervousness. Clara took the envelope, her heart racing, and immediately noticed the emblem sealing it, the symbol of the company Ricardo managed. She felt a wave of nausea. Could it be that Ricardo still had control over the people around her, even after everything? Was he trying to communicate directly with her? But her curiosity, mixed with fear, was stronger. She carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper inside. The note was short and to the point. "You thought you could stop me. I'm closer than ever. Be ready. The game has begun." Clara's hands trembled as she read those words. It was Ricardo, or at least someone acting on his behalf. But whoever it was made it clear that danger was approaching faster than ever. Clara took a deep breath, trying not to let panic take over. She knew she needed to stay calm to protect her son. That night, back at the apartment, Clara felt as though every shadow stretched longer than usual. The silence was oppressive, and with every sound, her heart raced. She decided then that she could no longer remain idle, waiting for the next move from Ricardo or the Dark Man. Ricardo was involved in something much larger and more dangerous, and Clara felt that the answers lay hidden in the details her husband had left behind. The next day, Clara went to Teresa's old office in the city center. The journalist was a bit reluctant at first, but upon hearing Ricardo's name and about Lucas's accident, her expression changed. Clara felt a chill. It's hard to explain in simple terms, but there's an organization, a secret society that manipulates powerful people, politicians, businesspeople. Ricardo was involved up to his neck with them, but we never knew how deep he was. What you're describing, the man in the darkness, the veiled threats, seems connected to the society's rituals. They have methods to control people. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Teresa looked Clara in the eyes, not breaking her gaze. "Yes. And if Lucas is seeing things, feeling presences, it means you are right in the eye of the storm. They want something from you." Clara's heart raced. But what? What do they want? Teresa took a deep breath. That's still unclear. But what is clear is that you and Lucas need to keep a watchful eye because they won't stop until they get what they want. And if you want to confront them, you'll need help. Clara left Teresa's office with her head spinning, an even heavier weight on her shoulders. The approaching battle was not just physical or emotional, it was spiritual. Back at the apartment, Clara found Lucas sitting in the living room, drawing something on a piece of paper. He looked up at her and beamed. "Don't worry, Mommy. Daddy said we're going to be okay." Clara looked at Lucas's drawing, a woman and a boy surrounded by a bright light. And in the distance, in the darkness, an imposing shadow, but unable to come closer. And Clara, now more than ever, felt a sense of determination. That night, after a conversation with Teresa, Clara had difficulty sleeping. The weight of the revelations about the secret society, the dark forces, and the mysteries surrounding her life intensified the tension in the air. Lucas slept in the next room, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil surrounding his mother. But Clara knew he felt the same presences, the same forces that were watching them. Since the accident, Lucas was not the same. Around 3 in the morning, Clara woke from an uneasy sleep, feeling pressure on her chest. It was as if something or someone was in her room, watching her intently. She slowly opened her eyes, trying to remain calm. The darkness felt denser that night. Clara's heart raced. Her first instinct was to get up, but something held her back. It wasn't exactly fear, but a feeling that the confrontation wasn't over yet. The figure didn't move, only silently watched her. "Who's there?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. The shadow remained still for a few more seconds before beginning to fade, as if it had never been there. Clara felt confusion and doubt swirl in her mind. Was it a vision, a manifestation of her exhaustion, or something much more dangerous? She tried to fall back asleep, but slumber was impossible. The idea that something or someone could enter her home without warning, leaving no trace, was eating away at her nerves. The forces against her and Lucas were not merely human, and that scared her more than any physical threat. Clara was taken aback, not by the question itself, but by the mature and reflective tone with which Lucas asked it. He seemed to be speaking of something he already knew, something he had an intimate connection with. Clara didn't know how to react. She wasn't a particularly religious person, but the idea that Lucas might be connecting with a celestial presence gave her a small spark of hope. Later that same day, Clara made one last attempt to find answers. She discovered a local priest known for dealing with cases of possession and inexplicable phenomena. Upon arriving at the church, Clara felt a strange mix of peace and anxiety. The interior of the temple was silent, the air thick with reverence, but at the same time, there was a sense of a spiritual battle being fought in every corner. "Clara," he began, his voice low and firm, "what you're facing isn't just a physical or emotional threat. Evil has many faces, and sometimes it hides behind people, actions, and events that seem harmless. But I can assure you, you're not alone in this fight. Your son, Lucas, has been touched by something divine. He has a rare spiritual sensitivity, something that makes him a target for forces as evil as they are benevolent. The first step is understanding that this battle won't be won with just words or physical actions. You need faith, spiritual protection. There are rituals that can be performed to ward off these presences, but the key lies in Lucas. He is at the center of it all, and his role will be greater than you can imagine." Father Miguel's words echoed in Clara's mind as she returned home. Lucas's fate seemed intertwined with forces beyond her comprehension, and the weight of her responsibility as a mother had never felt heavier. That night, when Clara was putting Lucas to bed, he looked into her eyes and said, "Mommy, the angel came back. He told me the dark man is growing impatient. But don't worry, he said we're going to win this battle together." Clara held her son's hand, her heart tight with worry. The pieces were falling into place, but the approaching battle would be unlike anything she had ever faced. Reality seemed to be unraveling in layers, and the constant feeling of being watched, pursued by invisible forces, became ever present. The sense of danger grew stronger with each passing minute. As Lucas slept in the next room, Clara checked once again to ensure all doors and windows were locked. Passing through the living room, the mysterious envelope she had received at the hospital caught her attention again. She couldn't stop thinking about the note and what it represented, a real, tangible threat, but also a game of power and manipulation. Ricardo was behind all of this, she knew it. But now, he was being aided by something far more dangerous, something that moved in the shadows, orchestrating events on a board Clara could barely comprehend. The dark man Lucas mentioned was becoming more and more present, and Clara could sense the confrontation drawing near. Determined not to remain at the mercy of the unknown, Clara picked up the phone and called Teresa. The journalist had promised to help, and Clara knew she couldn't face these forces alone. "Teresa, it's Clara. We need to meet. The noose is tightening, and I don't know how much time we have before something worse happens." Teresa sighed deeply on the other end of the line. "I knew this would escalate quickly. We'll meet tomorrow morning. I have something to show you." As she hung up, Clara felt a slight wave of relief. Teresa had been one of the few people who believed her without question, and now she seemed more prepared than ever to confront whatever lay ahead. But that same night, something terrible happened. Around 2 in the morning, Clara was awakened by a metallic sound coming from the living room. Her heart raced, and her first thought was of Lucas. She got up quickly, without making a sound, and ran to her son's room. To her relief, Lucas was still sound asleep, wrapped in the innocence of childhood. But the sense of danger was palpable. Clara grabbed a small table lamp and walked slowly down the hallway toward the living room. When she arrived, she noticed the window, which she had locked, was now wide open, with the curtains gently swaying in the night breeze. She froze for a second, feeling a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a tall, hooded man. He didn't move, he just stood there, watching her. "Who are you?" Clara demanded, her voice shaking with fear. The man didn't respond immediately, but after a few seconds, his voice echoed in the silence of the room. "I've come to finish what I started. You should have left all of this behind, Clara." Ricardo stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. His face was partially illuminated by the streetlight outside. He looked different, darker, as if the evils surrounding him had shaped his very appearance. Clara instinctively took a step back, trying to protect the path to Lucas's room. The air was thick with an oppressive presence, and she knew that, in this moment, she was dealing with something far beyond the physical. It was then that Lucas appeared in the hallway doorway, his eyes still half closed with sleep. "Mommy, is everything okay?" He didn't seem to notice Ricardo, only the tension in the air. The air instantly felt lighter, and Clara fell to her knees, exhausted, but with a sense of protection she had never felt before. The next morning, Clara woke up drained, as if she had run an emotional marathon. The encounter with Ricardo the previous night was still fresh in her mind, and the fact that he had entered her home left her uneasy. There was something far more dangerous than mere threats at play, and Lucas's involvement in this dark scheme made the situation even graver. But hope alone wasn't enough. She needed action. She grabbed her phone and called Teresa as planned. Her friend's voice on the other end of the line sounded determined, as if she had been expecting the call. "Clara, I'm on my way. I'll be there in an hour." "We need to talk about what I've found," Teresa said in a serious tone. While waiting for Teresa, Clara busied herself organizing the house, trying to control her anxiety. Lucas played with his building blocks on the living room carpet, oblivious to the tension filling the air. The weight of her responsibility to protect her son grew inside Clara like a wave that could no longer be held back. When Teresa arrived, her face was a mix of concern and urgency. She brought a folder full of documents and photos, materials that Clara knew contained secrets about Ricardo and the dangerous plot that involved them. "We need to act quickly, Clara," Teresa began, not beating around the bush. "I dug deeper into Ricardo's past, and his story is far darker than you can imagine." Clara remained silent for a moment, trying to process what she had just heard. It was as if all the pieces were finally coming together, but the picture they formed was far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. And for this, they need a child with Lucas's gift. That's why. Clara felt a lump in her throat. It all made sense now. The presences, the threats, the dark man Lucas saw in his dreams, everything was connected to the ritual of power that involved her son. "But I won't let that happen, Teresa," Clara said, her voice firm. "Lucas is my son, and I will protect him." Teresa nodded, understanding Clara's determination. They knew they were dealing with something beyond the ordinary, something that required more than just courage. "We need more help," Teresa continued. "I've contacted someone who can guide us. He's an expert in paranormal events and ancient rituals. He's been fighting against groups like Ricardo's for years." Clara hesitated. "We're dealing with something very dangerous, Teresa. How can we trust him?" Teresa looked directly into Clara's eyes. "He's not part of the group. He's fought them before. If we want a chance at stopping Ricardo, we're going to need him." Clara took a deep breath and nodded. The feeling of being unqualified for the battle ahead was overwhelming, but at the same time, She knew there was no other option. "When can we meet him?" "Tonight," Teresa replied. "He'll meet us in a safe place, outside the city. It's a bit risky, but I believe he can give us the answers we need." Clara knew this was the only way to try to save Lucas and stop Ricardo's advance. But the danger now felt even more real. Later that same day, Teresa and Clara prepared to leave. The tension in the air was thick, and the silence between them was necessary, filled with the awareness of what was to come. As they left the house, Clara looked at Lucas and felt a whirlwind of love, fear, and determination. She knew she was stepping into something dangerous, but for him, she would do whatever it took. The spiritual battle surrounding her life was just beginning, and Clara sensed that the final confrontation was near. But one thing was certain, she was no longer alone. Deep down, Clara knew that, despite the fear she felt, she was destined to win this fight, for Lucas's life and their future. As night fell, Clara and Teresa hit the road toward the meeting point with the mysterious expert Teresa had contacted. The tension in the car was palpable, the silence heavy, broken only by the sound of the tires on the asphalt. As the car sliced through the darkness, Clara gazed out the window, realizing she was on the brink of something colossal. The battle unfolding around her was bigger than her own understanding, but one certainty drove her forward: she would protect Lucas at any cost. Since Ricardo's visit and the presence of the angel, Clara had felt that invisible forces were vying for control of her destiny and her son's. When they finally arrived at the designated location, a small cabin on the outskirts of town, the atmosphere was cold and deserted. The trees around them swayed softly in the wind, casting long, unsettling shadows. Clara stepped out of the car, feeling a chill run down her spine, as if the very air carried secrets she wasn't ready to hear. Teresa led the way to the cabin door. She knocked 3 times, firmly, as if there was an unspoken code. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a tall, thin man with graying hair and piercing eyes. He exuded an aura of wisdom and mystery, like someone who had seen things far beyond what most people could comprehend. "You must be Clara," he said in a tone that blended compassion and gravity. "I'm Marcos." Clara nodded, nervous. "Yes, I'm Clara. Teresa told me about you. I need your help. I need to understand what's happening with my son." Marcos gestured for them to enter. The inside of the cabin was simple but cozy. Old books lined the shelves, and a small fireplace warmed the room. Clara felt a slight sense of relief upon entering, but the weight of her worries still hung heavily over her. "Teresa has told me about Lucas and what you've been going through," Marcos began, sitting in a wooden chair. "But what we're dealing with here is not just a family dispute. This goes far beyond anything any of us can fully grasp." Clara took a deep breath. "I know Ricardo wants my son. He mentioned something about a ritual, something called the Great Awakening. Teresa said you know more about this." Marcos nodded, folding his hands in his lap. "The Great Awakening is not just a ritual. It's an ancient ceremony meant to channel spiritual powers of the highest levels. Secret societies and dark groups have sought to unlock it for centuries, believing that by controlling this force, they could rewrite the laws of nature, death, and even life itself." Clara froze for a moment. "And what does that have to do with Lucas?" Marcos leaned forward slightly, his gaze more intense than ever. "Lucas, because of the accident, has awakened a rare spiritual sensitivity. He can see beyond the veil that separates the physical world from the spiritual one, and because of this, he is considered a key to these rituals. What Ricardo wants to do is use this sensitivity to open a portal between worlds and unleash forces he cannot control, but he thinks he can." Clara felt a lump forming in her throat. The idea that her son was at the center of such a dangerous plan was devastating. "But how can I protect him?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just a mother. I don't know how to fight against forces I can't even see." Marcos remained silent for a moment, as if weighing his words. "You're not as powerless as you think, Clara. A mother's love is a powerful force, something that transcends the boundaries of the physical and the spiritual. It was that love that drove Ricardo away once, and it will be that same love that protects Lucas. Clara wiped away a tear that had started to fall. Despite the fear, there was a spark of hope growing inside her. She wasn't fighting alone, and more than that, there was something in her love for Lucas that was stronger than any dark power. Teresa, who had been silent until then, intervened. "And what about the angel? Lucas has reported seeing him, and Clara felt his presence too. Does this mean that there's something or someone protecting them?" The barn door creaked slowly, as if about to reveal a long-kept secret. Clara felt her heart race, the tension in the air almost palpable. The faint light from the candle inside the circle cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the silence seemed to weigh down on them. Clara squeezed Lucas' hand, feeling the warmth of his small palm in hers. She whispered, "Stay close, my love. We're not alone." Teresa stood beside her, eyes locked on the door as it opened wider. "We're ready, Clara. Whatever comes, we'll face it together," she said, her voice steady despite the mounting fear. As the door finally swung fully open, a chilling wind blew inside, extinguishing the candle. Darkness filled the barn, except for a faint, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere. In the dim light, Clara could see a figure slowly emerging from the shadows outside, a tall, imposing silhouette. Ricardo. His presence was suffocating, as if the very air had thickened with his arrival. He stepped into the barn, his eyes gleaming with a dark, malevolent power. "So, you've come," he sneered, his voice cold and filled with a sinister confidence. "Did you really think you could stop me, Clara? This has been in motion long before you even knew." Clara's fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she stood firm, Lucas at her side, her love for him grounding her in the moment. "I won't let you take him," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I won't let you harm my son." Ricardo laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed in the barn. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about taking him. It's about unlocking what lies within him. The Great Awakening cannot happen without him, and whether you like it or not, it's already begun." Marcos stepped forward, holding the book with the protective sigil. "You're wrong, Ricardo. There are forces at play here that even you cannot control. The ritual can be stopped, and we will stop it." Ricardo's eyes darkened, his smile fading. "You think a few words and symbols will protect you? You're dealing with powers far beyond your comprehension." But just as Ricardo moved closer, something unexpected happened. The faint glow surrounding Clara, Lucas, and Teresa intensified. It was as if an invisible shield had formed around them. Clara could feel the presence of the angel that Lucas had described, its warmth and protection enveloping them. Ricardo recoiled, as if repelled by the light. His face twisted in anger and frustration. "No. This can't be." Clara took a deep breath, her fear dissolving in the presence of this newfound strength. "You can't hurt us, Ricardo. Love is stronger than whatever darkness you're trying to bring into this world." Ricardo snarled, stepping back into the shadows. "This isn't over," he hissed before disappearing into the night, his presence vanishing as quickly as it had come. The barn fell silent once more, the oppressive tension lifting as the protective light remained around Clara, Lucas, and Teresa. Clara collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by the intensity of the encounter, but also filled with an immense sense of relief. They had survived, for now. Marcos walked over, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You were right, Clara. Love is stronger than any dark power. But this fight isn't over. Ricardo will come back. He won't stop until the ritual is complete." Clara nodded, wiping away tears. "I know. But we'll be ready next time." And in that moment, as she held Lucas close, Clara knew that whatever lay ahead, she had the strength to face it. The love for her son, the protection of the angel, and the support of her friends would guide her through the battles yet to come. The night was far from over, but Clara no longer felt afraid. Get ready, Marcos whispered, his voice low and grave. Clara let go of Lucas' hand, who looked at her with curiosity, unaware of the gravity of the situation. I'm here, my love, she said softly, forcing a smile. Suddenly, the door burst open with a bang, and Ricardo entered. He was enveloped in a dark aura, his gaze fixed and penetrating. The candlelight flickered in his presence, as if the very environment was intimidated by him. So, you really thought you could stop me? Ricardo said, with a cruel smile. You are pathetic, thinking you could defeat me with a circle. Clara felt a wave of anger and fear. Ricardo's presence was oppressive, but she told herself that the protection they had prepared would be enough. Stay away from my son, Clara said, the determination rising in her voice. She had never felt so powerful, even in the face of the threat Ricardo represented. And what are you going to do? Stop me? I am stronger than you think, Ricardo mocked, stepping toward the circle. But as soon as he tried to cross the line that marked the protective circle, a bright light emanated from it, forcing him back. This can't be, he exclaimed, looking back, perplexed. How do you think you're going to do this? You underestimated us, Clara began, but Ricardo tried to advance again. The energy from the circle pulsed like a wave, pushing him back once more. This is nothing. I don't need to enter. I can end this right here. Clara, realizing the gravity of the situation, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Lucas, she said, turning to her son, listen to me. You need to use your gift. Remember the angel. He's here to protect us. Lucas looked at her, confused, but Clara saw a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Mom, I can feel the angel. He's with me. Ricardo, realizing what was happening, grew frustrated. No. You can't do this. You're just a child. But the light surrounding Lucas intensified, enveloping them all. I won't let you hurt my mom. This is impossible. Ricardo roared, his face now twisted in anger and desperation. I will destroy you, and this boy will be mine. Marcos, sensing Ricardo's vulnerability, began chanting words in an ancient language. By the power of love and light, I banish you. Return to the shadows from which you came. The dark energy that Ricardo had summoned began to fade in the face of the light emanating from Lucas and the protective circle. Clara felt a wave of hope flood her heart. It was as if Lucas' light was illuminating the path to victory, banishing the darkness that had threatened their family. Ricardo, now surrounded by the light, staggered and tried to retreat, but the power of the circle was too strong. This isn't over. I'll be back, he shouted. With one final scream, he was expelled from the circle, and Clara and Lucas felt the tension dissipate as he was forced out of their protection. The circle's light flared brightly for a moment before dimming, leaving a soft glow around them. Clara looked at Marcos and Teresa, both breathless but smiling in relief. We did it. We really did it. Lucas looked up at his mother, his eyes shining with confidence. I'll be okay, Mom. The angel is always with me. Clara smiled at him, feeling the strength of the love they shared. Yes, my love. We'll always be together, and we'll always be protected. As Marcos and Teresa prepared to strengthen the circle and ensure that Ricardo couldn't return, Clara felt a wave of gratitude. She had faced her greatest fears and, with Lucas' help, found the strength to fight. Clara commented as Marcos and Teresa moved with a sense of urgency, organizing the materials they had brought. She knew that what had happened that night was not just a physical conflict, but a spiritual battle that could have far-reaching consequences. We need to establish a more permanent protection, Marcos said, holding a metal box they had brought. Inside it are the ingredients we need to create a protective amulet for Lucas. How does it work? Clara asked, curiosity mixed with a hint of apprehension. She wanted to understand every detail so she could be fully prepared for what was coming. The elements we use have specific properties that will strengthen the connection between you and Lucas, Marcos explained. Teresa intervened, showing Clara a small cloth pouch. Once the amulet is ready, you need to give it to Lucas. He should wear it whenever he feels in danger. It will help him feel safe and connected to you. Clara nodded, making mental notes as she watched them both. And what about us? What if Ricardo comes back? Once the amulet is finished, we'll use a ritual to strengthen the power of the circle. This will create a defense around your house and Lucas, keeping you both safe. Lucas watched everything with wide eyes, fascinated by the activity around him. Can I help? Clara smiled at her son, admiring his courage even in the midst of chaos. You are very special, Lucas. Your light shines brighter than you can imagine. And now, a quartz crystal. This crystal amplifies positive energy and protects against negative energies. Clara watched closely, feeling the warmth of determination in her heart. She knew she wasn't just watching but becoming part of something bigger, a joint effort to protect her family. As they worked, Clara began to feel an increasing connection between her and Lucas. It was as if their energies were merging, creating an unbreakable bond. After a few minutes, Marcos finished assembling the amulet, placing all the ingredients in a small cloth pouch and tying it with a blue ribbon. It's ready. Now, you need to give this to Lucas, he said, handing the amulet to Clara. Lucas took the amulet in his small hands, and a glimmer of understanding shone in his eyes. I'll take care of it, Mom. And the angel will too. With the amulet in hand, Clara felt a new level of hope ignite inside her. Now, we need to strengthen the circle. Marcos, what should we do? Clara nodded, determined. Let's do this. As Marcos began drawing a new circle on the ground, Clara and Teresa joined him, focusing on the energy around them. Let's connect, Marcos said, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Let the love flow and strengthen the energy that protects us. Clara and Lucas joined hands, and she felt a wave of warmth flow through their bodies. The circle's energy began to glow, pulsing at a steady rhythm, as if it was responding to their love and intention. After a few minutes of concentration, Marcos opened his eyes and smiled. It's done. Now, we have an even stronger protection circle. But remember, it's important to maintain faith and a connection with love. That will always be the key to our protection. I promise, Clara said, looking at Lucas. We're together, and we'll always be safe. With the protection and the amulet ready, Clara felt more confident than ever. But deep inside, a shadow of worry still lingered. Ricardo could return, and they needed to be prepared. I won't let him, she said, feeling a renewed resolve. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lucas and our family. It was time to head home, where their true battle for the well-being of their family would begin. Clara and Lucas left the barn, and the cool night air wrapped around them like a comforting embrace. As they walked back home, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that, although they had won a battle, the war was far from over. I'm scared, Mom, Lucas confessed, his voice small compared to the sound of the breeze blowing around them. What if Uncle Ricardo comes back? Clara crouched down to look her son in the eyes. I know, my love. It's normal to be scared. But we have the amulet and the protection circle. We'll always be together, and that makes us stronger. As they approached the house, Clara noticed that the lights were on, which was unusual for that time of night. A sense of alarm washed over her. Something wasn't right. Why are the... I don't know, dear. Let's find out together. Clara led Lucas to the front door, her heart racing as she tried to assess the situation. Marcos. Clara called, her voice echoing in the quiet night. Teresa. Nothing. Just silence. Clara felt a wave of panic. What if Ricardo had followed them there? Let's go, Clara said, pulling Lucas closer as she opened the door. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the light inside the house seemed to have a menacing glow, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Please, let them be okay, Clara murmured to herself as she moved through the room, each step echoing in the silence. The shadows danced around, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Look, Mom! Lucas exclaimed, pointing to the dining table. The amulet Marcos had left in the house was still there, exactly where they had left it before leaving. But next to it, something was different. A note. Clara moved to the table, her protective instincts intensifying. She picked up the note, her hands trembling as she unfolded the paper. The words written were simple, but their meaning resonated like an alarm in her heart. It's not safe here. They're coming for you. Leave now. Who left this? Lucas asked, looking at his mother with wide eyes. Clara knew the message was clear, but she had no idea who could have sent it. I don't know, my love. But we need to act quickly. Clara felt a rush of adrenaline. We're going upstairs, and you must hide in the closet. I'll check if Marcos and Teresa are here, Clara said quickly, guiding Lucas to the stairs. If I scream, you know what to do. Lucas nodded, his eyes wide with fear and determination. As they climbed the stairs, Clara felt the pressure of time weighing on her shoulders. Once she reached the top, Clara hurried to check the rooms, calling for her friends. Marcos. Teresa. Go, Lucas. Hide. Clara whispered, pushing him toward the hallway closet. Lucas quickly ran and hid while Clara continued her search, tension building inside her. That's when she heard a noise coming from downstairs, a sound of something breaking. Her heart raced, and she didn't hesitate to rush down the stairs, her determination firm. If Ricardo was there. Clara grabbed a lamp, its weight like an extension of her own strength. As soon as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw a hooded figure moving through the room. The presence froze her for a moment, but she quickly regained her courage. Who are you? What are you doing here? Clara demanded, her voice firm despite the fear surging inside her. The figure turned, revealing a familiar face. Clara, it's me. Marcos exclaimed, panting as if he had been running. We have to leave now. Ricardo is close. Is Teresa here? Clara asked, anxiety rising in her chest. She stayed behind, trying to block the door. We need to go now. Marcos said, his eyes filled with urgency. Clara felt the overwhelming need to protect her son, but she knew there was no time to waste. Lucas is hiding in the closet. We need to get him and leave immediately. Let's go. Marcos said, and together they ran toward the hallway, adrenaline surging through their veins. Clara could feel her heart pounding, each beat echoing her fear and determination. As soon as they reached the closet, Clara opened the door quickly. Lucas, come on. It's time to go. Her son's face emerged, still wide-eyed. Mom, what's happening? There's no time to explain. We need to leave now. Clara took Lucas' hand, and the three of them hurried toward the front door, ready to face whatever was lurking outside. As they opened the door, a cold breeze hit them, and Clara felt the tension in the air. Come on, quickly. The trio ran along the path leading to the nearby forest, the sound of their hurried footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. Clara could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, but her concern for Lucas and Teresa never left her mind. Marcos, do you think we're safe here? Clara asked, her voice trembling. She couldn't help the fear that crept into her heart. For now, yes, Marcos replied, glancing over his shoulder. But we need to keep moving. Ricardo might be following our tracks. His expression was serious, and Clara knew every word mattered. Is Teresa? What happened to her? Lucas asked, his eyes wide with worry. Clara could see the mix of innocence and fear on her son's small face. She'll be okay, Lucas, Clara said, trying to convey confidence, even though she was just as anxious as he was. Finally, they reached a clearing in the forest, where the moonlight filtered through the trees, creating an almost magical setting. But for Clara, there was nothing magical about that night. Danger still loomed, and she knew it. Let's stop here for a moment, Marcos suggested, looking around. We need to regroup and think. Clara agreed, but the worry was evident on her face. What if Ricardo is following us? If he is, we won't give him a chance to find us, Marcos said, his determination shining through. Lucas looked at the amulet, still firmly fastened around his neck. What should we do with it now, Mom? Clara thought for a moment and said, we need to move quickly and quietly. Before they could leave, Clara felt a strange presence in the air, as if something was watching them. Marcos, do you feel that? Yes, he replied. The three of them started moving along the trail, careful not to make any noise. Every step was taken cautiously, as if they were walking on a minefield. Are you sure she's okay? Clara asked, her confusion growing. She knows what she's doing, Marcos responded. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the lake. The water reflected the moonlight, creating a scene of tranquility that sharply contrasted with the tension they felt. Here, Marcos gestured. Clara led Lucas inside the cabin, while Marcos shut the door behind them. The interior was dark, but Clara lit a small candle she found on a table. A dim light illuminated the wooden walls, casting dancing shadows. Stay close to me, Clara said. Lucas snuggled against her, and Clara wrapped her arm around him. Mom, I'm scared, he whispered, his voice trembling. Marcos glanced outside through the small window, tension building in his body. There's no sign of Ricardo yet, but we can't let our guard down. He could appear at any moment. Clara felt a wave of determination. The amulet will protect us. And if we need to, we can use the energy we created in the circle. Yes, Marcos agreed. The three of them sat together, and Clara began explaining how to use the amulet. She talked about the importance of focusing on their connection and staying united. That's what will keep us strong, Clara said. Lucas nodded, his eyes glowing with newfound courage. Yes, Mom. I feel it. I'm ready to fight. That's right, Marcos encouraged. Clara's heart warmed with the determination of her son and Marcos. They were a team, and together they would face whatever challenges awaited them. But she knew the danger wasn't over yet. The atmosphere in the cabin was tense, and Clara knew time was running out. With every passing second, the feeling that something was about to happen grew stronger. We need to create a barrier with the amulet and the circle's energy, Clara suggested, her gaze focused. That will keep us safe while we plan our next move. Marcos nodded. We can do it. The energy we've built together is powerful. Let's concentrate. Clara sat on the floor, pulling Lucas close. Close your eyes, Lucas. We're going to take deep breaths and imagine a protective light surrounding us. That light will keep us safe and strong. The three of them closed their eyes and began breathing in unison, forming a current of energy. Clara could feel the growing power in her hands as the amulet pulsed, emitting a soft light. I can feel it. I can see the light. Lucas exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. That's right, Lucas. Keep going. Clara encouraged. Feel the connection between us. The tension in the air continued to rise, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Something was coming. We have to be ready, Marcos said, his voice low but resolute. Clara nodded, her determination renewed. We'll face this together. The amulet will give us strength. Then, without warning, the cabin door burst open, and Ricardo stepped inside, his threatening gaze illuminated by the moonlight. Well, isn't this sweet? A little family reunion, he sneered, a cruel smile on his face. Stay away from my son. Clara shouted, holding up the amulet. You can't harm us. And what are you going to do? Throw that little trinket at me? Ricardo laughed, stepping closer. You're pathetic. But before he could get any closer, a wave of energy surged from the amulet, and Clara felt the connection with Lucas and Marcos strengthen. Don't come any closer, she commanded. The light around them flared brightly, and Clara directed the energy forward, creating a barrier that pushed Ricardo back. He slammed into the cabin wall, startled. "You can't," Ricardo began, but Clara cut him off. "You're wrong." Clara's voice was firm. "The love we have for each other is stronger than any evil you can bring." Marcos stood beside Clara, his expression unwavering. "Let's use the energy from the circle," he urged. "Yes, let's." Lucas chimed in, feeling the power of the light surrounding them. "Together, we're unstoppable." Clara and Marcos joined hands, placing them on the amulet. "Please, give us strength. Protect us," Clara prayed. The light grew brighter, and the energy around them intensified, forming an impenetrable barrier. Ricardo tried to move forward again, but the force emanating from them was palpable, and he was pushed back, struggling to stay upright. "You can't win," Clara declared, her voice echoing with confidence. "Love is more powerful than any evil. This isn't over," Ricardo shouted, but his voice was filled with desperation as the light around Clara and Lucas continued to grow. He realized he was losing control. With one final scream, Ricardo attempted to break through the barrier, but the energy repelled him forcefully, sending him flying out of the cabin and crashing to the ground outside. The brilliant light finally enveloped Ricardo, and he disappeared into the darkness of the forest, defeated. Clara and Lucas collapsed to their knees, exhausted but relieved. "We did it. We won," Lucas exclaimed. "Yes, we did," Clara responded, wrapping Lucas in a tight embrace. Marcos joined them, smiling. "The power you two have is incredible. It was our connection that gave us strength," Clara explained. As the light from the amulet dimmed, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The evil presence that had threatened them was gone, and they were finally at peace. "Where's Teresa?" Lucas asked. "We're going to find her," Clara replied, determined. "She needs us just as much as we need her." With renewed strength and the moonlight guiding their way, Clara, Lucas, and Marcos left the cabin and headed into the forest, ready to find Teresa and restore safety to their lives. Together, they would face any challenge that lay ahead, knowing that love and unity would always prevail.